You wake up at the same time, not because you're rested, because that's when you wake up now, right before the break of dawn. You sit up, same motion. You reach for your boots, loop, pull, tighten. You check your gear once, then again. You run your hands over it like you don't trust your eyes, like you don't trust your memory. You follow the sequence. You don't skip steps, not because it guarantees anything, but because you've learned what happens when you don't. Under fatigue and pressure, you don't think properly. There's no time to. Things move too fast. Faster than thought, faster than explanation. And in those moments, you don't become someone new. You fall back. You rely on what has been repeated enough to hold. You return again. Before any of that, you were already inside a rhythm. Breathe in, breathe out, again and again. Heartbeat, cycle. You didn't learn the rhythm. You started inside it. Everything alive does. Nothing sustains itself without repetition. Day and night, tension and release, growth and decay. Patterns repeat across scales, in your body, in the world, in everything that continues to exist. You don't invent structure, you emerge inside it. The body moves before the mind. You react before you explain. You act before you fully understand. The body doesn't wait for meaning. It executes. It remembers through repetition. You don't just recall patterns. You perform them. You become them. What repeats becomes easier. What becomes easier becomes automatic. Paths form, not visible, but very real. The more something is used, the more it is returned to, until eventually the response comes before the thought. And by then, it no longer feels like a choice at all. Every animal moves this way. They repeat. They prepare the same way every time. No theory, no ideology. Sequence. Ritual is older than language, older than explanation. Humans didn't invent it. We recognized it and imposed it, deliberately or not. Patterns run deeper than memory, carried forward, repeated across generations. Not taught outright, but still present. But humans don't stay aligned. They drift. They break pattern. They move out of rhythm. Sometimes slowly, sometimes all at once. They rely on improvisation, on instinct without structure, on the belief that they will adapt when the moment comes. Until something happens. There's always a moment. Something moves faster than you can think. Something doesn't respond the way it should. You thought you had time. You didn't. You thought you understood, but you don't. And reality does not correct you gently. It snaps. And once it does, you stop trusting improvisation in the same way. You stop relying on hope. You stop assuming you'll rise to the occasion. You begin returning to pattern. That is ritual, not invention. Return. Something that works repeated, deliberately, exactly. Not because it's perfect, but because it holds. Because it aligns with something that survives pressure. You reduce variation, you remove drift, you constrain yourself. Do it this way every time, not that way. Because limitation creates form, form creates reliability, reliability creates stability. Ritual is not freedom, it is constraint, self imposed, repeated, maintained. You narrow action down to something specific and stay inside it. That's what gives it power. That's what gives it shape. That's what makes it usable when everything else breaks. And pressure reveals whether the structure is real. Anything weak will not hold. Anything inconsistent collapses under repetition, strain, or time. This is true in the body, in training, in relationships, in civilizations. Reality is constantly selecting. Stable forms survive. Unstable forms drift apart. So over time, ritual becomes narrower, more refined. The unnecessary burns away or is dominated by more efficient ritual. You preserve what holds, you repeat what survives. It is not free, it costs you time, energy, comfort. Doing it when you don't want to. Doing it when everything in you wants to break pattern. And that is the point. Because what costs nothing doesn't hold. Ritual without sacrifice becomes performance. It becomes aesthetic, convenient, abandoned the moment pressure arrives. Real ritual requires payment, not symbolic, actual. You give something up, and in return, you get structure, something you can return to when nothing else is stable. And humans don't keep this at the level of the individual, they build it outward. Stone stacked on stone, layer after layer, structures built on the same logic, repetition, alignment, order imposed upward, temples, ziggurats, pyramids, not decoration, pattern made permanent, action turned into structure. And at the center of those structures, the same exchange. Something is given, something taken, food, animals, sometimes people, because they believed stability required sacrifice, because they believed alignment had a price. And this is where it becomes dangerous, because you don't need the whole pattern to build something powerful. You only need part of it, one rhythm, one stable structure, something that appears to work. You align to that and build everything around it. A belief, a system, a culture, a cult, a society. It functions, it scales, because repetition works, because structure stabilizes. That structure can be a core for a surrounding incompleteness. Repetition reinforces whatever it is attached to. Signal and response. Something happens, and there's a reaction. Repeated again and again until the response comes before the thought. This is how conditioning sets in, not just individually, but collectively. You don't need force, you need repetition, timing, reinforcement. Something that feels true because it works often enough. And once it embeds, it runs on its own, a false ritual, structure without full alignment, stability built on partial truth. It can last a long time. It can organize entire civilizations, but eventually it drifts because it isn't aligned deeply enough with reality itself. And eventually something will break. So you are left with two directions. You can try to force reality into your structure, or you align yourself with structures already present within reality. Both use repetition, both use ritual. One attempts domination, the other attempts alignment. One pushes outward, the other returns inward. Most people move between the two constantly, trying to shape what they can while surrendering to what they cannot. Strip everything else away and something remains. Ritual is not just repetition, it is alignment. Repeated until it holds. Repeated until it becomes automatic. Repeated until it survives pressure. You don't rise to the moment. You return to what you've aligned with. So you return to the sequence, same time, same steps. You check again. You run your hands over it. You confirm. You don't think. You return again. Because the world does not stop. The cycles don't stop. Pressure does not stop. And if you drift too far, reality corrects you. So you return again and again and again.